administration is going to match the fund. And so it was an opportunity that I just couldn't turn down, in terms of being able to actually have financing to address structural inequities experienced by children and families and the early care and education workforce, and the opportunity to do this work in places like Flint, Michigan, and Detroit, and my hometown, Benton Harbor. If you don't know Benton Harbor's story, you definitely want to check it out. It's all those places are unfortunate examples of what structural racism looks like, and what has been hollowed out in Michigan. And I think along with a lot of other important efforts, hopefully this Child Care Innovation Fund will help us to be able to start to make some progress on that work over time. It was a really, really hard decision to make. I wasn't looking for a new job. I was very much enjoying my work with all of you and with the CCR&Rs and with many of our other partners. But as I said, just felt a very compelling call to work on this issue, especially because of what's happened during the pandemic and how many people we have seen that have been affected by this. So my last day at the Early Learning Division is actually going to be February 12th. So I'll be wrapping things up between now and then. I want to say that we are working diligently to be able to have some extended time with Aaron Watson, who worked on the theory of change, to actually help us to continue to do some training and technical assistance with all of you. So that's in the works. And of course, you all have today a conversation ahead of you about the draft scope of work. And we believe that Aaron hopefully will be able to help us with that and many other things. So it's been really my honor and privilege to work with all of you. And I'm terribly sorry that the pandemic got in the way of us actually getting to spend a lot more time together. But we have to, I guess, deal with what we get offered, not always what we want. So I don't want to take a lot of time from your meeting. I know you have a lot of important topics, but I wanted to be able to tell you myself. I wish you all the best, and certainly hope that you will stay in touch. I mean, I consider all of you colleagues for life. You can reach out to Denise or Carmen or John or Margie if you'd like to be able to stay in touch with me, or you want to ask me a question or shoot me an email. They'll have my contact information, and I'm happy to have that be shared with all of you. So best of luck to everybody. It's been wonderful to get to know you and be with you. So take care.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Joan, for all of your amazing work. It's been an honor.
Thanks, Lisa.
All right, thanks everyone. Well, change afoot in Hubdom as always, which we're all quite used to. So we will march forward as we do. So speaking of changes and what's happening with the legislature now, we're going to introduce Troy Duker. He'll let us know where we're at.
So it's been a very busy past couple of weeks. And first I want to say thank you to the folks who submitted testimony to the Early Childhood Committee yesterday on the 3 bills that were up. I really appreciate that. There weren't too many questions, which is usually a good sign that those bills will likely move. So there were 3 up. There was HB 2053, which was the technical fix to the baby promise and preschool promise statutes. If you recall, the community plans were drafted incorrectly, or the sector plans were drafted incorrectly in the preschool promise statutes. So we're going to copy and paste over the community plan, the version that's in the baby promise, over to the preschool promise statutes. The next bill was HB 2054. Those were the technical changes to the Early Learning Kindergarten Readiness Partnership and Innovation Program, KPI. Denise was on deck to help answer any questions. Fortunately, there weren't any regarding that. And then finally, Valeria Atanasio. I don't know if you folks have, well, so I know some folks in this room know her. But yeah, she's the tribal affairs manager. She testified on the uh, Tribal Early Learning Hub bill. That's HB 2055. So it's looking positive. I think those bills should move out of committee. They haven't been scheduled for a work session, which is where that takes place. There is one more bill that has been referred to the Early Childhood Committee, and that's the bill that we discussed regarding the technical fixes to the Spark statutes. That's HB 2059, if I recall correctly. That will be up on Monday, the 8th for hearing. And then we have a couple of other bills, SB 49 and SB 50. Those are our background check bills. SB 49 was the transfer of the background check process for the license exempt ERDC providers. The transfer of those background checks from DHS over to the Office of Child Care. And then SB 50 was the recorded programs bill. Both of those bills will need amendments, and we'll be discussing that a little more as we get those scheduled for hearings in the Senate Human Services Committee. Also tomorrow, there will be a pretty extensive presentation, I think with 4 or 5 different folks in attendance regarding just early care and education, the broader, just a broader overview. And so David and Sarah from the Early Learning Division, David Mendel and Sarah Michelson, will be presenting there tomorrow. I encourage you to tune into that if you get a chance. That's 1 o'clock. And you can find that at the OregonLegislature.gov website under committees. Just look up the House Committee on Early Childhood, and you'll be able to click the video there. Happy to take any questions from folks. All right.
No questions, Troy. Just appreciation for you coming and giving regular updates to us. That's really helpful.
Thanks for having me. Carmen always reminds me, so I'm happy to be here at any point. So
Great.
Troy,
Thanks.
I really appreciate you.
alrighty. Have a good afternoon.
See you, Troy. Thank you. Okay, so next up on our list, just a couple updates on funding. Everybody, where are we with funding on things? So folks have been asking about the OPEC funding, that $1 million. Where is it? And we have some good news that is finally looks like it's making it out of the bowels of DOJ. And so it looks like we should be seeing that in the next couple of weeks at last. And just to give you the really high level on that, that will will run $1 million. Doesn't go very far, really. It's going to be $44,000 to each of the OPEC hubs, and we'll each get $44,000, which is equivalent to about 70% of the overall funds will go directly to them. And then there'll also be some additional money, around $80,000, that will be for actually training new parent educators, which is awesome, and then $20,000 for TA. Other dollars are, of course, the dollars that go through OSU, and also for money that we have with them in the Hallie Ford for technical assistance and evaluation. So the good news is we should be seeing those dollars shortly. We'll keep you updated on that as that is rolling forward. So that's OPEC. Go ahead, Bess.
A question on that funding. Is it, what are the restrictions or the allocation centers that you're looking to see for the 44K? Is it pass through to our agencies that are offering classes? Can we take FTE for that? Is there any restrictions?
I'm gonna have to look and see if any, if what the restrictions are. I think most of it is supposed to be passed through to the OPEC hubs, but I can check into that and get back to you what the admin or whatever is.
And this will be to be spent by 6:30?
Yes. Yeah. So I think it'll be half by as soon as we launch through the end of March, and then the second dole out, I think, goes from April through June 30th.
And so those funds, we're under the 6:30
Yes.
It happens.
deadline.
The 44,000 has to be fully spent out by June 30th.
And is it for 0 to 6?
Yes.
Okay.
I just wanted to also note that and welcome Sue Miller. She joined the call.
Good, thank you.
Hey, hi,
Thanks.
Sue. Welcome.
So Denise, is this gonna be a standalone agreement, a grant, or how's it gonna be sent to us?
Standalone grant. Yep. So separate from the other, since it's very specific to that program.
And is it a grant that's, I'm sorry that I'm confused about this, Denise. So the $44,000 we're talking about, doesn't that flow to OSU who gives it to parenting hubs, or is it coming to early learning hubs?
Cass, can you answer, do you know specifically how that works?
Well, sometimes I don't know how things work, even though I think I do. But right now, I'm in the process. This is an intergovernmental agreement between the Early Learning Division and OSU. So the money would go to OPEC. OPEC is setting up to distribute the $44,000 through to the OPEC hubs. Originally, it was going to be in addition to the agreements that were already happening, but because of timeframes, we switched it over a little. They wanted to switch it over a little bit different, so it's it'll go to the OPEC hub, and it'll get delivered out that way. The training dollars, I think, which is earmarked for 80 educators to be trained. I think that money stays at Oregon State and will just go directly to those. I can follow up and find out a little bit more of the mechanics of how that money is getting distributed so that I'm not saying anything that's not accurate. And I can find out pretty quickly about that.
Thanks, Cass.
Of course.
Can I just say one quick thing? And this is me not ever wanting to look a gift horse in the mouth, but the fact that we're getting this in February when we've already done our mini grant process with the agencies that we fund through OPEC traditionally is going to make it really hard for us to spend down this money in this period of time because those series are already sort of planned and set. And so to scale up and to provide additional funding, I think is going to be a little bit of a challenge. So I just want to say that out loud because normally we would have been able to expand the size of our grants and our grantees would be planning for that level of service and those number of class series and things like that. And so just if anybody has any like great creative ideas for how to go from 0 to 60 really quickly and getting dollars out the door to educate more parents, like I'd love to hear them. So
Okay, Bess, Shauna Tomine and I have been speaking about that. She's been my counterpart in this process of working through a procurement. And there were some things that were just out of our hands that
Oh, totally. Yeah, not at all blaming anybody, just acknowledging.
Yeah, of course. And acknowledging that's one of the biggest things that is on our radar is to help figure out how to make this move as quick as possible once this agreement gets signed and we can get to work.
Awesome. I'm super
absolutely.
happy to hear that and welcome the assistance. Thanks, Cass.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're good. Okay, so Anne, give us a quick update on the coordinated enrollment funding for next year.
Yeah, very quick, like 2-sentence update. So coordinated enrollment funding for next year will continue to be a standalone grant agreement, and we are looking at annual amounts for that. So considering sort of what you all received from Student Success Act and PDG for this year and thinking about how to allocate that on an annual basis for next year.
Great. Thank you, Anne. So more to come on that. Go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry about that. A little bit outside of that funding, that's great information. And do we know yet what the process will be for the providers for next year? Are they going to be reapplying? Hopefully things will be expanded as part of the legislature, but what's sort of the early thinking on how that's going to flow for next year?
Yeah, and I don't believe we have any of our program team representatives on this call. I know they're considering how to best work on next program year for Preschool Promise and what that process will look like.
Probably bring that in March. Be a good thing that Carmen and I can add to the agenda. It's a good question, though.
And Begonia put in a really good question in the chat.
I see that. Yeah. So the question for anyone joining by phone, will the annual amount be similar to the one we got this year? So knowing that this is Student Success Act funds, of course, we are subject to seeing how session shakes out, but we are proceeding with estimates with similar amounts unless we hear differently.
This is Kelly. When you say similar amounts, do you mean similar amounts of SSA, or do you mean similar amounts of SSA plus PDG plus general fund?
Yeah, we're looking at sort of looking at the similar amounts of the grand total of the coordinated enrollment funding that you've received.
So kind of current service levels.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so my next question is, if we have questions on how to get our funds spent out this year to make sure, so I haven't submitted my budget to you yet, and are my funds waiting for you to release those funds in EGUMs? Are you waiting for my budget so you can do that? My business manager's asking me, and I'm saying, I bet it's because I haven't figured out my budget yet. And can you help me with that budget? Because I'm struggling with a few pieces.
Happy to help. Absolutely. And yes, as we get budget and the expenditure reports in, we're releasing funds in EGUMs.
Awesome. Thank you. That was my assumption. And okay. Thank you.
And
So,
just to follow that really quickly, are our reports to you and due on the same schedule as our quarterly hub reports, or are they monthly? How do you want them? You may have answered this and I just don't remember.
sure thing. Yeah. So the expenditure reports will be on the same schedule as the other hub reports.
Great. Thanks.
Good. Okay. There you go. More than 2 sentences, Ann. All right, everybody. So just to let you know what we're going to do for the rest of our time together today. I'm going to do just a really brief overview of the whole statement of work. We're going to talk about our feedback process. Carmen's going to tell us about that. And then we're going to go into 2 breakout rooms. And in the breakout rooms, we'll have half the hubs in one and half in the other. And Carmen and I will facilitate those with Ann and Cass taking notes for us. And we have a series of questions, and we'll really then get down into the meat of the statement of work in those groups, in those smaller groups together, so that we can take in the feedback in a little bit easier way with such a big group. And I know a few people have to get off at 2 o'clock. That's fine. I think we'll have enough time to get through a good part of our time together in the breakout rooms. So let me just start by sharing just the overall document with you.
Hey, Denise.
Yeah, go ahead.
Would it be okay if I do the whole process first, so that we don't have to switch mind frames back to it?
I love it.
Thank you. Sorry, I just realized it would be smoother in my head, at least. Thank you for being flexible. Okay, so let's swap that. So I'm gonna walk everyone through just an overview of our draft feedback process. Like I said in the email with the scope attached to it last week, this isn't the only time that we're soliciting feedback from you. And honestly, your feedback is welcome to us through this whole next time frame leading up to March 10th. So if you leave this meeting and you're like, I have burning questions and things that come up afterward, please reach out to Denise and I. She and I are the main writers of this scope of work. So we really want to make sure that we're hearing from you and that we're producing something that is in line with the theory of change and is in line with what you need to be successful. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So the way that we're envisioning this is that we'll have essentially 3 rounds of conversation with you. And some of that includes you and your staff and your background agencies and other community members. So here we are today at the top on this first conversation where we're talking about the general fund and the scope of work, just an overall review. We want to get initial responses. We want to get some initial feedback, make sure we're not just off the mark on anything, and start making tweaks and changes after this. The conversation that we have today will be taking this feedback from you and in tandem with the scope of work draft to the ELC meeting on the 10th. And then we'll take feedback from that meeting back to our writers group. So Denise and I will work with our team to go over all the feedback from you and the feedback from the ELC and see if what needs to be changed, added, adapted. Then our plan is that we're going to bring that next product draft back to you on February 17th. I'm about to send you a Zoom invite later today, but I wanted to make sure you knew what it was before it popped up on your calendar. We're anticipating that meeting being about 2.5 hours. It might only take 2, but we want to make sure we have enough time rather than not enough time. For that meeting, we would like for you to have your hub and also to extend the invitation to your backbone agency to have a representative, right? The contract is with your backbone agency technically. So we want to make sure that they're involved in reviewing the scope of work. As we've been saying, we really heard you loud and clear about the capacity being really important. And we are looking at capacity as being a really important part of the scope of work, making sure that we have reasonable expectations. So having the backbone there is huge too. We also would like for your governance council chairs or other members or executive members to be invited to that. We'll be using breakout groups again so that we can have smaller conversations. But recognizing that the people on this call are just a few of the leaders that are involved in your hub. So we want to make sure that other people have their feedback as well, and we get different lenses and perspectives. And then Denise and I will bring that feedback again back to our work group. And then we'll bring you a third draft. So in February, what we're going to do is we're going to open up to an even bigger conversation, and we'll be inviting that same group from the second conversation, as well as we're going to ask you to bring in regional stewardship members and your parent advisory, your parent leadership council members, and then other key stakeholders that you might identify. And then what people will do is that we'll have 3 identical sessions. And so people will be able to choose from which one of those they want to go to, which best fits their schedule. And that conversation, that feedback let me back up a little bit. That one, our goal is to have the theory of change, the scope of work, and your deliverables and funding all side by side. Because our goal is that we're going to be able to look at this whole thing and say, can we do with this funding what's listed in this deliverables column? And do these deliverables give us what we've said in our theory of change is our end product over time, right? So we want to have, again, like a really a reasonable look at it perspective. And again, your hub is you and all of your leaders and community members. So we want to open that conversation up. And then Denise and I will bring that work back. And hopefully we're done with this and sending it to procurement by March 10th. Before I take questions, in this third conversation, we need you to start thinking about who you would like to invite from your community to be at that meeting, to be at those sessions. They only need to attend one, and what's scheduling capacity that we need to look at then. Primarily, like what time of day would work for them. So if you're like, I would like to invite this set of people, and some of them would need an evening meeting, letting us know right away so we can make sure that we have that and what kind of timing that looks like. This is our draft of how this is going to work. This is what we're hoping to do. We really want to be able to show you this in rounds and make sure that there's a lot of chances for your feedback to do this as partners. Any questions on any of that before Denise does a walkthrough of some similarities and differences in the scope of work between now and last time?
So Carmen, this is Begoña. How long are these meetings, and could you piggyback on existing meetings?
This one is piggybacked on an existing meeting. And the next meeting that we have together is not until the first week of March, which is really going to be pushing it. It's going to be really tight time frame for Denise and I to do changes if anything significant comes up in the last round of feedback. So that's why we haven't made the March 2nd meeting this feedback. If people feel like that's what they want to do, we could talk about maybe making whether or not that could be an option. But we want to leave ourselves time to work with your feedback.
This is Lisa, Carmen, and I'm curious, after conversation 3, if you could say a little bit more about what you're hoping to get out of that conversation. And then also, my assumption is that from 1, 2, and 3, you're going to be incorporating modifications to the statement of work, but will there be a chance for us to see what the final is before it becomes final?
Or I think that, and Denise, correct me if I'm understanding this wrong. What we're hoping is that this conversation 3 is you looking at what's essentially our final. And so there might be small changes here, but hopefully not anything too significant. If we do uncover things in these broader community conversations that are like pretty significant and we end up incorporating that, then yes, I think we would try to get you to see that to make sure that we've interpreted what the asks were for and that it's reflected in it.
Yeah. I don't
Does
see
that make sense? Like it kind of depends on how big the changes are. If they're really small or if there really aren't significant things, I would anticipate sending out a final again. But if it does feel like, yeah, we missed the boat on something and needed to go back, then we would want to double back to be like, is this reflective of what we heard? Denise, does that sound right in our time frame? You're a lot more familiar with the time frame than I am.
Yeah, no, yeah, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't show it to you guys one more time before it shoots off to procurement, just to say, because I mean, essentially, this is going to be the grant you're signing, right? So we're not doing a open bid process. We're not doing an application process. This is our process, is to work in partnership to get it pulled together. So there's no reason we can't send you the file and just say, hey, do one last before it goes to procurement. Now, the understanding too, as you all know, is when DOJ gets hold of it, we may have language, there may be some things. So I would suspect that throughout the spring, we're still in conversation, depending on what kind of things, what kind of changes they make. But it shouldn't be anything hopefully significant.
Hey, this is Molly. I just want to piggyback on that as I think about the way our parent council, which looks like they would come in at conversation 3. If there's really no significant input from them because you don't want anything to change at that point, then I just will frame it for them that way. You know what I mean? It's I guess it's the question, I guess, let me see if I can get this out of like, what type of feedback are you going to be looking for in these conversations so that I can not waste anybody's time in a sense by getting them there.
Yeah, and Molly, I don't mean I hope that no one has anything to say and doesn't have any feedback because I don't want to hear it or we're not going to make changes. I think that came out wrong when I said that. What I'm meaning is like, personally, I like hope that we can get it pretty close to right with all these different levels, but we are really like, we're designing this because we really do want people to be there and like to have their input. And if they're looking at it and they're like, this is not what is going to work for our community, or like, I want to see something written in here that prioritizes this particular piece of work over other work, then we do want to hear that. Like, we are reserving time in our work life and like outside life to make significant changes if they have to happen. So I definitely don't want to have an insincere feedback session.
Okay, me neither. So
yeah,
that's helpful.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up, and I apologize if that is the way that if I said that wrong.
Carmen, thank you. There was other people in the chat box that were kind of asking similar questions. So thanks for that.
Yeah, sorry everyone. I'm kind of off. I have a lot of illness in my family right now with COVID, to be honest, and it's like it's kind of making it hard to find the words these days. But yeah, no, we are actually really excited to hear feedback from all these different groups and have spent a lot of time thinking about how to do it in a meaningful way. So I hope that we'll be able to have your partnership as usual in pulling all those voices in.
So, Carmen, I don't know if I hear correctly last time, but the deadline to submit this thing to procurement was March 1st. So that was the day that you were aiming for?
March 10.
Oh, okay. So I was wondering if it was first, if you would have the chance of reviewing the feedback from the 24th, 25th, 26th, compile it, and then come with a final document, do one more like back and forth or something like that.
The March 1st date is my internal date for our people inside, because we have an absolute drop dead date, and I'd rather be 2 weeks ahead because I know how things get. So, but yeah, our plan is that week following that first week in March after these feedback sessions is to do the incorporation, which is why I'm not sure whether we'll be ready on the 2nd or not to share any additional changes. Hopefully we can do that, but depending, we will get that out probably that week, and then hopefully submit by March 10th.
Okay, so we will be able to see the final copy. Okay, that's what I know. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we don't want anyone getting the copy and saying this has changed so significantly, we don't agree with this now. So yeah, we'll make sure that you guys get to see everything as we progress along.
Hey, Denise.
Yeah.
Is there a copy of the timeline that we could share with them so that they could share with folks?
Carmen will send that out, I think, with the email invite for the 17th. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, I can do that.
I think it's Christy that has a board meeting and that she'd like to share, so that would be helpful.
That'd be great.
Okay, great. Thank
Yep.
you.
Do we know how long in duration the third meeting will be? Is it another 2.5 hours? Is that what you're thinking?
I think it's probably 2 hours. Part of that meeting is that it will, we'll send out meeting materials for people ahead of time so they'll have seen like theory of change and everything before, but we do want to allow time to bring people into the conversation who haven't had as much time with the material and who, as you all have at this point. So yeah, I know I think it might feel like it's kind of long for people who are more in the work right now. But we want to hold that space.
Yeah.
I'm feeling, yeah. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, you guys. Well, let's get going so we have time to get in our small breakout groups as well. But just real quick, let me just pull up. I might have you do it, Carmen, if I can't get right to it here. The actual statement of work. Let's see. Sure. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So just a couple things I want to draw people's attention to. First of all, as Carmen said, we're not ready with the funding formula yet. So we have not really anything to say about that, except a couple of things that I'll just as an umbrella. One is you were all aware that in the winter and spring of 2019, we actually formulated a group together of external stakeholders, as well as 5 hubs that participated in a funding formula work group. I think we had about 18 participants in that work group, and it was an 8-month process. And we came out with a recommendation that at the time did not get taken by ELD. But there was a lot of excellent work that was done by that group. And we're going back and re-honoring that work and looking at it. And I think there's many pieces of that will probably inform what we do with the new funding formula. What I can say is that we've been pretty clear that we want to increase the capacity funding to hubs, and that means probably debucketing the way that we allocate the general fund dollars. Because as you know, right now, we have of our approximately $17 million for hubs, not counting KPI coordinated enrollment, we've got about 10 million to coordination and the other 7 million that go into what we've coined community funds. And that's a lot of those dollars that you allocate out in those streams. Now, some of those streams like Title 4B can't be debucketed because they're required because of federal dollars to be spent in the communities. So they're not dollars we can move to capacity, but things like the school readiness fund, which equates to close to $3 million, we can look at as a possibility. So that is part of the conversation. I just wanted you to know that. And I think another important thing that I feel pretty confident in is the poverty data proxy that we have used in the past, SNAP, will not survive this next biennium. So we're going to be looking highly likely at the American Community Survey data. That was a recommendation of the funding work group. It's what the CCR&Rs use, and it's a much better data source. It's a 5-year average for communities, and we have very updated, clear and concise data from 2019. So that will be one of the elements when we think about, once you do some capacity funding, how will you allocate. So I don't want to get too much into that because I know it's a big conversation and people have a lot of questions, but do know that we're looking at that. We're looking at transparency and capacity, and making sure that in this scope of work, you have the funds that you need to be able to do the work. And I also think it's just worth putting there, we know that there's a $1.4 million cut in the governor's budget. We will operate as we develop the funding formula with that cut in mind, and then keep our fingers crossed that we end up with a $1.4 million gift at the end that we can allocate. But don't want people to think there's more and find out you have less. So more to come on that. Hopefully by the 17th, we'll be much further along in that process. And we'll be able to talk a little bit more holistically about that. So that's a funding formula. Next piece, just want to draw your eyes to, is that when you look at the scope of work, I think for many of you, you'll see, the way we have it set up is that the theory of change is over the top. It's kind of the leading thing, and then you can see how it connects to each bucket of work. And I would bet that a lot of the language looks very familiar to you because a lot of it came directly from the current contract in a more clear and concise way. We know that there was a lot of old baggage hanging on there for the last 7 years, things that didn't necessarily make sense to us anymore, or we've never really got to. So we've really cleaned that up, and we've tried to be much more aligned to the scope and the deliverables and the theory of change. And I think just before we go into the breakout groups, the couple things I would draw you to that are new, like the new things that are in there that you're going to see, are the community-wide assessment that we're going to ask you to do, which I think people were really on this anyway when we did the sector planning last December. So that's going to be a new deliverable in there. Developed Parent Leadership Council. That's a new deliverable. It's big. It requires capacity funding and work and technical assistance, and that will all be part of the plans that we put together for you. But it's really time for us to get the parent voice and the parent leadership piece more developed into your governance structure. You'll see. Yeah, go ahead.
To interrupt you. I can't, on mine, it's not, I don't know if you're scrolling and my computer is yours.
Oh, I'm not scrolling.
Thank you.
I didn't scroll, I just talk, So here, you're right. So here, we'll scroll up to here. The staffing plan, this one's probably freaking some people out, like, why is there a staffing plan? Well, again, if we're going to increase those capacity dollars, then we want to assure that people have the staffing. If you're going to do, I'm sure as Molly and Francis can attest to us, if you're going to have a PAC, you need staffing to be able to do that work. And we recognize that. So that having a staffing plan and knowing that there's a professional development plan for your staff, that's going to be a new requirement that you see in there. And then the other two things would be, everybody has a strategic plan, but there's never been a requirement in the contract for a strategic plan. So the strategic plan, the way the workflow is going to happen, we're going to want a strategic plan for every hub, and we'll get more into that as we go along. And then finally, our old friend, the comprehensive children's budget, which has been there for years, but we never did anything with, and then we finally took it out, is coming back. And we actually think it really has an important place in thinking of the theory of change and the overall looking at the funding. And as we're talking to the Early Learning Council, for all of you and how we're in partnership with the council, to really be able to talk about, here are all the funds in our community, and here are the places where we're really seeing gaps in funding. Council, help us fill those gaps. So I think this is really going to help us have a better picture of the communities. And all of these pieces, new or existing, will come along with technical assistance plans and work that we do in partnership together. So I think the other thing you see that you don't see here are all the due dates, because we're still kind of figuring out. One of the things we want to talk with all of you about is what makes sense, in how we lay this out and how much time it's going to take. Like a comprehensive children's budget, we're not getting to that in the very first year of the contract. We know that. So especially if we're doing all these other things to set the table. So I don't want to just throw dates out like, oh, in December, you're going to have the work plan. We really want to be very intentional about those and kind of decide together, how long is it really going to take to build a strategic plan, a sector plan, et cetera. So just those are the kind of highlights of new stuff. And then I think now's a good time. So we have time to break into the breakout groups, and we'll have some more in-depth conversation. And to Carmen's point, we'll actually be able to scroll through the document and look at it together. All right. So hold your questions, and we'll look forward to see most of you come back here about 2:20. And Anne's going to go ahead and break us apart.
Yeah, I will open us up now.
Thank you.
Let's see, I think I've got one person joining by phone, and I'm not sure which group to put you in. Let's see, and Sue, are you assigned as well? You're assigned, okay.
I think I'm in room 2.
All right.
You're inviting me to room 2. Thank you.
Yes, wonderful. Okay. So now whoever is still in here, I guess who's left? Maybe you're. Are you having any trouble here? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put you in the waiting room here.
We probably should pull that group back together just to get a quick overview again. And then the interesting thing is I was sitting here thinking about the strategic plan, which we have worked on every biennium, I know. And if we're going to put it in the contract, that's going to be interesting. So, but I do like the fact of the funding around for like the PAC and stuff like that. I think that that's hugely important, because it makes it easier to pull partners to the table when you're having that kind of conversation.
Mm-hmm. And I actually would like to have some conversations offline from today with some of you about specifically funding for things like PAC and parent engagement events, to get a good understanding of what you think that cost is. I would prefer to not guess how much it costs to do effective parent engagement.
Carmen, I would say if I know that there are a couple hubs that do effective parent engagement, and it would be helpful to look at costs in a urban area like in Washington County and Multnomah, as well as those who have the geographic spread instead of kind of the urban like density and really super diverse populations. Just because I would wonder if there's differences in the way that we think about the funding based on some of those differences in types of hubs.
Absolutely, like travel, et cetera, is going to be
or interpretation if you're having multiple languages, that kind of stuff. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
But to me, there is like two types of parent engagement here. One is a closer one to us, that is the Parent Advisory Council, and the other one is in the different like community-wide assessments and other pieces that are moving at the same time. So it's not just one static budget that we need, but it has to be two of them.
I think building on that, Begonia, I think as I was going through, I mean, I know, you know, Multnomah, we have a population the size of South Dakota. It's not an easy place to organize. And I cannot make a single board of directors work here, but I'm just trying to, it just seems like a lot of different separate entities to accomplish the work. You know, you've got the regional and you've got the governance situations, and then I don't know, that I still have to kind of lay out like how that all fits together.
Yeah. So and maybe Molly, this is a good so one of the questions that we have for you is and I'll just share like our thinking and writing this was finding the places where you want more latitude to design and create on your own, and places where there should be really explicit direction. So like, for example, the governance council is in there, a parent leadership council is there, and then there's a place where you're asked to address the childcare supply in a certain way. But then, and that's sort of like the minimum. And then I'm, you know, imagining like what you're describing, well, you might need different kinds of these like, you know, sort of councils or committees, which is a place that we've left that to you to know your area. Am I correct in thinking that it is best to leave that to you and to offer like conversation or like TA or outside perspective if you want help to think about what other groups, or is that something that you'd want to see more explicitly in a scope of work?
I'm good with flexibility on that personally.
I like the flexibility because then it gives us the opportunity to build on what is already working and then make adjustments as needed.
Okay. So I guess, yeah, go ahead.
A question though is, I'm just trying to, what in your mind of the current draft is flexible and what is not? I think that might be helpful for me to understand to answer that question.
That is a big question.
Can we just tell you what we want?
Yes, you can just tell us what you want.
I mean, it's a question for all the input that you're asking. Like, what is open for input and to what extent?
Yeah. And honestly, like, I think what would be the most helpful, being candid, is for you to tell me if there's a thing that you're like, specifically, Dorothy, when you say that, are you like, is this piece flexible? Because if it is, I'd like it to be B instead of A. That's helpful, because I'm part of this whole org where I can bring back to you and I can advocate what it is you're saying and like share your perspective. But I don't personally have like, you know, I can't decide like yes or no. These are all going to be things that are committee conversation. But if there are things that you're like, this, can we change this? Like, that's what this conversation is. And Anne is taking notes for us. And if, as people are saying something, you need us to like go back and clarify or want to hear more about it, please feel free to interject.
Can you share right now, Carmen, you know, to help me at least, to define what you define as parent engagement? So we are going to be doing work. We're going to have, you know, outputs, outcomes. And so, what is the final result look like? So I know, as far as if I want, where I want flexibility. And so I need something more about how you're defining parent engagement and what it's going to look like from your perspective or the state's perspective.
Mm-hmm. Well, what we're going for is having parent voice and experience integrated into the work of the hubs and into the work of whatever like subgroups, things like Molly is talking about that you have.
So, and Carmen, I would just expand, like in, some of our communities might have parent leadership councils, but what you're explaining right now is we all have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and I think also, I know that also part of this theory of change involves that we are, we know that there's leaders in every community, right? Like when we say like, we don't, like people say like empowering communities, the power is already there. So bringing those voices to the forefront also. So we're not just like increasing the amount of engaged leadership and empowering people to like have leadership and voice in the community as well, right? So it's not like parents are only going to be able to be leaders in the community working on initiatives with you when they're at your table, but that they're able to do that work outside.
And so I need some more. So for example, what I'm thinking of is we have Yoncalla Early Works, that is parent led.
Mm-hmm.
I go to their table because they have a table that's been working together for 6 years. So my thought is that, and others that tables I've gone to, that they set the table, that's part of my parent engagement. And so what I'm trying to clarify, did you want me to start a whole nother group, or do you want me to be aware of the groups that exist that I'm already doing and a part of that and part of the conversation, and then infusing things from the hub and asking for more input? That's what I'm trying to clarify, because it may not look like a group. So when you have 19,000 something square miles, so there's different cultures, there's different, living in Lakeview, they don't see anything similar to Douglas or Klamath. And so there's different, populations, and worked really hard to get to their tables. And so where I'm a little confused is, so am I asking them that I'm setting another table that they need to come to? And so that's what I'm trying to clarify.
Thanks for that, Jillian, because I was going to ask something sort of along the same lines of, pre-COVID, our strategy for this past biennium was going to be to work more closely with the parent-led groups that exist, some which are like very, like high functioning parents really lead that work, and others that probably need more support. And so rather than start a new table where we may take parents away or attempt to, rather than set another table where it may not be as effective, try to support the parent-led groups that were already happening, or in some cases, maybe there is a new table that needs to be set. But again, similar to Jillian, we have 3 counties, and it's, I think sometimes hard for us to think about. One of my questions as I was reading through it is like, how do I balance the desire to have really a parent-led group, but recognize that parent-led group should not just be for the hub, but across early learning programming across the community.
Right, because but that would be hub work still in our mind. Like when you're describing something that goes across the early learning community, like that's the region of your hub. So those could be the same. So I think let me see if I can restate what I heard as a question for ELD to think more about, that maybe Anne can help me capture. So what I'm hearing is, would it be an option to write into your work plan parent engagement with existing parent groups or committees that already effectively engage and promote, respond to parent voice? as an alternative to creating your own parent council.
Yeah.
Herman, this is
accurate?
Christy, and I want to jump in on this because when we first started as an early learning hub, we had a planning grant opportunity from Northwest Health Foundation to try and create a parent advisory council. I got Molly's information, loved what they were doing in Multnomah, worked the entire process with our community and our partners. And what they told us is that we needed to hire a person to come to the tables that were already set, not to create another table, especially across the 3-county region. And so we, based on that input, we hired a parent engagement coordinator whose job it is to go to those parent groups and engage with other, opportunities with parents throughout the region.
Yeah, this is really great feedback.
Yeah.
And I also I can also see like how if there are organizations that already have like really strong parent voice integrated into their work, that asking like that organization if they can like help you find parents to be in a different group would be like pretty snotty, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
They're like, we're already doing that. Like, why are you making another group with our same parents? Yeah. Okay.
I just want to some clarification about something that you said, Carmen, about the PACs being open to the system at large. So we actually open it to the DHS or community action or the WIC program when there are other issues. But there is also the risk that sometimes for many things, it requires multiple sessions to prep them. And it requires multiple months of participation until we can actually build a solid foundation. So that the feedback could be more impactful, more meaningful. It requires time to coach them and to train them so that they can grow. And there is a lot of information that sometimes they are like, okay, slow down, do not give us so much information, let me digest this thing. So we also have to be careful with that piece, that we shouldn't be thinking about one group serves all the purposes, but we will have to go to different groups and partner with them to solve different issues.
What if you were able to say, like, demonstrate, I'm thinking of what wording, demonstrate in your governance structure that parents are deeply engaged. Like, you don't have to specify, make a council. You could say, show us how you're engaging with them. Because in Multnomah, we did it the reverse way. We made a council, but the way we engage with all the what other people have on their boards is we go to their tables. Like, we didn't pull them into one. We just flipped it. But that's still our governance structure, is we meet with these people in their settings. We don't ask them to come to ours. So as long as there's a way in the language to have us be able to explain and be approved by you how we are engaging all of these voices in the issues of the hub, which you're defining broadly as the early learning system within our region, then I don't know, the risk is it becomes super big, and what we need is some oversight of our investments, but the rest of our governance structure for a lot of us means we go to other tables. We don't create a new silo. We go there.
Right. I think I guess another question I have is, how would we need to think about knowing that the groups that we are, if we're using the existing groups, what would we need to do, or what would you need to do to know that you were reaching all of the various like communities that needed to be reached, and that the ways that they were involved at the tables that you're going to are truly inclusive of them? Because I think that like a lot of organizations are awesome, like especially when it comes like out of their own communities, like that's their community, they're running the table, like it comes out like the way that they're making decisions, the way that they're inviting people, all of that is very like, it's comfortable to them, right? Like but there are places where that doesn't always happen. So my question is like, if you're doing this alternate version, like, how would you show in your work plan that you are hitting all the people that you would hope to hit if you were creating your own group?
I don't know that that's an exclusive problem to going to other tables though, because you can create your own table and still not hit all of the populations you need to hit within a community.
Right,
And I
but
would,
you have
and
less control.
True. I mean, I guess, like, if perfection is what's expected, then we're all gonna fail. Like, right? So I think we should start at a place of like, you know, like possibly wrong, definitely incomplete, when it comes to like all of the work that we're working towards. And there should be some assessment of maybe this is part of the regional assessment of the parents that we are engaging and where those gaps are and what the strategy is to fill those gaps. That might be helping support some of those tables already that exist, finding additional parents to come to those tables, or it could be, is this a place where we do need to create a new table for a specific population? But I think that applies whether or not we have a strategy where we have our own table or we go to other tables. I think from my perspective.
100%
That's great.
agree.
And honestly, like, that answers a question for me, because like I didn't mean that question as like a well, this would never, I really mean like, how would we know? And I think you just answered that. Like, we might not know, but if we don't, if we have to be the kind of organization that like creates partnerships where if people are like, hey, like, I think we're missing this group, or that you can say like, hey, are we missing this group?
Right. I think you need to go into that endeavor strategically, because you've got to think about, what, especially if we're doing community plans or extension of our ECE planning, are we reaching all of our priority populations and showing in what way? So, for example, I may not be able to go and talk to my Guatemalan refugee population in South Lane County because there's like 2 mom to Spanish to English interpreters. Like, it's a difficult language situation, but I could potentially, work with a partner down there that works with them to get some written feedback or online feedback just to inform a particular decision or something. I just think that we should remain open and flexible to the multitude of channels that we have deployed in the past to collect parent feedback, because we've all done that. I mean, we have all solicited and collected parent input and feedback in a variety of different ways. And I hope that part of the advisory piece of a parent, of the parent, milieu, is that it's not specific to us convening a table every month
And
in a
Carmen,
fixed way.
Carmen, it makes me always feel really nervous when you guys say that we have to be engaging everybody, because we have more than 85 languages. So if engagement, you are thinking about the lifetime of the hub, I might be there. But if you're thinking about the next 2 years, I will say it's not going to happen with 85 different communities. And at this point, as we speak, we might have 98.
Right.
What I'd like to see is us get together like this and come up with creative solutions. So as we've been talking, in my mind, I went, oh, the Focus Childcare Network has a Spanish-speaking group in Klamath Falls. So they have a Spanish speaker that comes from Southern Oregon by agreement with the CCR&R there, because we don't have anyone in Klamath that we can do that with. So what if, I worked with CCR&R and, included that group and worked with the person who is working with that group to get the input of their families, and they're probably parents too. And so I think that it's the uncommon, it's the solutions that we haven't maybe always thought of. So what are the possibilities? And I think that is what's been really helpful to me, versus grabbing parents and thinking, okay, I got to get a parent, okay, this has a title of a parent on it. And so what are other pieces that we could be doing that, that would be really helpful to our work? And I think brainstorming like this on a continuous basis of, the uncommon possibilities would be really helpful.
Yeah, this conversation has been really helpful. You're giving us a lot to think about. I want to check in with Danny and Chelsea. Your hub is really strong parent family engagement. Before we move away from this topic and I ask other questions, do either of you have any like burning things you want to say or contribute?
I think the little side comment I made to Danny, so we had our little back and forth here between us on this thought, was that we found that there was a lot of power in being at all of those other tables, like we were going to Head Start advisories and all of those places, but there was still a different benefit to holding our own. So we still had a Spanish and an English parent advisory council, and we met, and that was kind of staffed by us at the hub, and it was we really blended it really hard with our OPEC hub and all of our parenting education there, and it just, each of those brought a value. There was a value add to doing both of those things, and so just kind of in our thinking moving forward, I'm just thinking about how we continue to use both being where there already is groups and tables in place, but how we can effectively run our own as well.
And then beyond that, Carmen, you asked what we need, and I put in the chat box that we need bilingual staff. Right now, we know we're not being very effective at reaching our Spanish-speaking population, let alone anyone else who doesn't speak English as their first language. So that's really what Chelsea and I have been pushing and hoping for. And hopefully next week, it sounds like maybe we will have a bilingual required job posting open for at least a little while.
That's
And get
great.
somebody who speaks that language. But we had, having translators is just not, it's a band-aid solution. It is not helpful for a lot of parents. So it's not giving us everything we need.
Great, thank you. I'm really excited to hear that. You've been working on that and having that conversation with the county about getting that as part of your job description. So kudos, that's an important step. Take these steps one at a time, right? Okay. And how did that go, capturing that firestorm right there in the middle? You good?
I'm good. I am verbatim some of this stuff, so I really appreciate you all.
Cool. Was there anything else where, well, we got to that with where is there space to change things? Was there anything else that jumped out to people as something where you're do we really need this, or can we change this to be something totally different?
What was that? Oh,
sorry, Molly. I'll just quickly, one thing that jumps out at me, and I know Denise kind of gave the caveat, like TA is TBD, but when there's training requirements listed, I get just a little squirmy because that's a place, and I'll speak personally, where I would like some fixed determinants, like just like, who can we call on to do the training? How long does it need to be? Who needs to attend? I appreciate flexibility too. I think maybe it's not so much fixed like deliverables, but more just, I just need some information on that. That's a piece that I feel like I struggle with, to figure out who is a good trainer that I can afford with my budget, and that is, is qualified and hopefully has lived experience. I just feel like I'm not very experienced in vetting, and hosting those kinds of trainings. We've done them, we've pulled them together. They've had varying degrees of success. But I always feel like I'm scrambling to try to get somebody really good.
As a professional training program manager in my recent past life, I totally get that. And that is actually a place that we've been talking about a lot. So in terms of the equity deliverables, I think there's a note at the top of the scope of work that says these need to be inserted, because there's a subcommittee at the ELD that is writing the actual equity deliverables that will be part of every contract. And those have that, I think last year it was 8 hours of equity related training or something like that. That the last that I saw it was explicit that it would be something that you would be just tying into your work plan. So it's this is what we're working on right now, and so therefore our training we've chosen is this, and we'll be
got it.
That makes sense.
I
in
like
terms
that.
and yeah, because we want, I mean, everyone's in different places,
Right.
right?
Right.
So it doesn't make sense to say like everyone has to do this one or that one because our organizations are so different. Our staff are different. We're
Right.
bringing on new people, so we want it to be something that's effective, not just like, no one wants to go to the basic equity training one more
Right.
time and describe what culture and value are for
Right.
the 100th time in their life. Not that I've had to do that way too many times. So does that answer? There's other TA spots on there. I know we only have a minute. I know that Molly had something, Beth, I'll tell you that I'm really into helping you all make sure that you're accessing TA that's affordable and that's quality. So when we get to that part of the work, I will be there to make that happen.
I will rely on you.
Yeah. Molly, you had something you were going to jump in with.
I did. I just put it in the chat, but I think that's okay. The comprehensive children's budget is going to be an issue that a lot of people are going to want to talk about. So when you convene those bigger groups, that might be a good place to ask for input from them.
Okay, great.
Yeah, because like last time we had to do it, it was a weird age. It was like 0 to 6, and we had no data that covered that 5 to 6. All our data covered to 5. Stuff like that. They can really be super helpful and would be a good use of their time.
Can I now I'm just thinking aloud, so don't hold me to any of these brainstorms I have right now. But do you think that it would be a good idea to have like 1 or 2 of those sessions be topic specific, so that people who like wanted to give feedback on a certain thing could go to that one?
Maybe. I think if it's something, I really don't know that anybody's going to want to come, to be super honest. I think it's going to be hard to get people there. I mean, and in part because the state never asks for input and never takes it, broadly speaking. So nobody's really going to believe us.
It's
going to be hard. It's going to be a really hard sell. So I think as specific as you can be about exactly what you're asking and what you'll do with the information you get, that's going to help us in Multnomah anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Molly is so correct on that, Carmen, because we have to be able to say to our partners, like, okay, this is exactly what is going to be talked about. This is why we need you to come. Like, we have to give them clear, precise information in order for them to be like, oh yeah, no problem. We'll do that. Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay.
So it has to be about the hub. It really does. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And then I would love, I know we have to go back to the group, but in terms of like that engagement and like how it doesn't feel like people get to see like if their input or how their input was used, like that, maybe that could be a really useful ongoing conversation for you all to give me some feedback on, like how can we do that for you to share or for us to hold, and so that we can build that trust and engagement by actually showing where it is that we're using that input. I would really appreciate your assistance in thinking about that later.
Carmen, I can see some parents asking me, maybe it was me the way how I read it, but there was a lot of loosey-goosiness around the core work for the hub. And they will want to know, is the core work going to be all this coordination and facilitation of system assessment, strategic plan, annual plan? And where does coordinated enrollment fit here? And I can see by listening to all of you that parent engagement by itself is going to be a lot of work. So are we going to be defining like the core work a little bit more?
Yeah, that's going to be in your work plan. Like our idea is like when you get the work plan template, it's going to be like really help you explicitly say like what you're doing in each of those categories and like what the tasks are, like what are your actions, how you're going to measure that. Like I'm saying measure, how will you know like when you get there, and how are you going to collect feedback on that? So it sounds like we've identified another place to think about how we're communicating and how maybe the ELD can support your conversation with the
It looks like we came back. Where's the rest of them?
They must be having a big old conversation.
There they go.
Hi.
Welcome back.
I just want to follow up on something real quick that was just said in our breakout group regarding a request to be able to see deliverable dates. And I just wanted to make sure to clarify, like the reason that we didn't want to put them in there is that we knew that would be a whole conversation in itself. Is like, what's a reasonable timeline for all these things? And we really wanted to have the conversation that we just had first, because it was really valuable to hear in the beginning, like what your gut reactions were and things that were just like, this can this change? This is a big change. But we will have deliverables in there for you to look at, like well beyond the final draft.
And give feedback on as well.
To get feedback on that too. And you're welcome to call and talk to us about that or email too. And that goes for really any of this. I know, like, as Anne was taking notes and I was listening to our conversation, I was writing down topics that I wanted to make sure that we circle back to you on. So I hope that you'll all be able to carve out a little bit of time to answer Denise and I's phone calls when we call you next couple weeks and are like, hey, tell me more about what you're thinking on this and that, because there was a lot of valuable insight given.
As well. The other thing is, we mentioned in our group, Carmen, that we're going to send the questions out to everybody, because I think for a lot of people, you haven't had much time to dig in. And as you're going through, you can jot down and look at the questions, just jot down some feedback to us. We would really appreciate that, and be thinking about, to your point about the timeline. Again, we talked about this in our group too. Like, we know that doing a community assessment is a big chunk of work. We know that doing a strategic plan is a big chunk of work. We did not want to just throw in there, give us a work plan on December 15th. We really want you to think about, like, it's going to take us 4 months to do that. Like, we're not going to be able to do the comprehensive children's budget for at least, 14 months. So we would appreciate your feedback on those timelines as well. And we'll be having more conversation.
Great.
Just a quick thing on that. If you can please overlay that with the coordinated enrollment work that is going to be continuous for us, and how all of those big deliverables fit into some of that, because I don't want it to be like,
Totally.
What, Dorothy, you want to see all your work in one place? What? And like your year and your staffing, come on.
And if we have to deliver by a deadline, can you guys do that too? Like, can you get us the templates on time too? Or can our deadline start after we get the templates? Or
Well, the templates, I think, is a good point, Molly. And I think the templates will be another place. You're going to be so busy giving feedback and co-designing here. We're going to have a hard time getting any work done. But really, again, like, we had a lot of feedback on the quarterly reports, and we know they're not great. And I hate that we don't have a database. And but we're going to need some co-design from you guys on those pieces as well. But yes, there is, hopefully having Erin Watson will be helpful, and some other TA supports that Carmen and I have to help develop all these templates and with your feedback.
So I will send out that engagement timeline that we shared earlier, and also you'll get a Zoom invite with reiteration of who it is that we would love for you to invite along to the next meeting.
Yep. And probably more to come on maybe some small group work together on some certain sections. There was a lot in my group about the sector planning, Carmen, and how that all fits together. And so I think like I said, we may be tapping you all, and as we get through, those are our official feedback circles. We'll be wanting to talk in some other groups too. So if there's something you feel really passionate about, like, hey, we want to talk about this, so let us know. All right, we appreciate you.
Your time today. We really appreciate you, and you're helping us give good feedback on this.
Yep.
Take care, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.